Welcome to the Childhood Shadows series. It is said that some friends were extremely terrified of toilets after watching this movie, fearing that some monster would drag them in. Without further ado, let's revisit the classic horror film Deep Rising. In a certain area of the Pacific Ocean, there is a trench deeper than the Himalayas. Countless ships have mysteriously disappeared here over the centuries. Today, a luxurious cruise ship appears on these waters, and the wealthy passengers on board are enjoying the opulent maritime lifestyle. The owner, Simon, is quite satisfied with the ship, believing it to be an unsinkable palace at sea. However, they are unaware that a catastrophe is approaching. At this moment, a sexy and hot lady in red has already taken action. Trillian is a notorious pirate with a long list of criminal records. She simply walked past the captain and effortlessly snatched his wallet. Subsequently, she uses the keycard inside to enter the vault. Just as Trillian is joyfully holding a priceless diamond necklace, Simon, Captain Atherton, and others suddenly appear. No one can imagine that such a beautiful girl is actually a thief. There were no cells on the cruise ship, so they put Trillian in storage for the time being. Meanwhile, the male protagonist of the story, John, makes his entrance. He is the captain of a speedboat, and a group of mercenaries approaches his team to transport a batch of goods. However, mechanic Joey accidentally discovers that these are actually torpedoes, and he is brutally beaten by the mercenaries. Fortunately, John arrives in time to defuse the crisis, with enough torpedoes to sink an aircraft carrier and well-equipped mercenaries. It's clear that this business deal is not simple. John senses that something big is happening. As expected, a mysterious person infiltrates the control room of the cruise ship and uses hacking techniques to make the ship's systems, including radar, go haywire. Just as everyone is puzzled, a crew member suddenly discovers a giant creature rapidly approaching. Then, the sea monster violently collides with the ship's bottom, causing the entire oil tanker to shake violently, and people are tossed around by this immense force. Keep in mind, this is a ship weighing thousands of tons, and it's hard to imagine how large this sea monster is. On the other side, the mercenaries on John's boat also begin their action. At this point, they are busy installing a torpedo launcher at the bow of the ship. John instantly feels that something is terribly wrong. Suddenly, the radar issues a warning. Due to the proximity, John cannot avoid it and collides with a speedboat that fell from the cruise ship, rendering the ship's engine completely useless. Fortunately, the torpedoes on board do not explode. After the turmoil subsided, the crew, through binoculars, spotted the luxurious cruise ship, and at this point the mercenaries were no longer in disguise. Their real aim was to hijack the cruise ship in front of them. The mercenaries eagerly climbed aboard, ready to make a fortune. However, the situation was not as they had anticipated. On the enormous cruise ship, not a single soul was in sight. It seemed as if everyone had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only extensive bloodstains on the floor. Could this be a ghost ship? The eerie scene did not deter the money-hungry mercenaries. They were only focused on quickly finding valuable treasures and making a swift exit. On the small boat, Layla was busy repairing the large hole caused by the collision. Suddenly, a body soaked white by the sea surfaced and Layla was stunned. Who would have thought that the real danger lay in the water? On the other side, Trillian, who was confined in the warehouse, woke up without any knowledge of what was happening outside. She was still thinking about the wealth on the cruise ship. After destroying the electronic door, she once again arrived at the door of the vault but was caught by the mercenaries. Hanover, lacking any sense of compassion, roughly interrogated Trillian about what had happened on the cruise ship. Vivo, nearby, couldn't resist using the keycard to open the vault door, but they were met with a sharp firefight. The mercenaries were dumbfounded by the suddenness of the situation and they opened fire, killing those inside in an instant. Simon, who had narrowly escaped death, frantically kept mentioning the existence of monsters on the cruise ship. Hanover naturally wouldn't believe such nonsense. One mercenary observed the seawater churning continuously, as if something was beneath it. In his confusion, a powerful force directly dragged him into the water, and no matter how he struggled, he couldn't break free. At this point, everyone finally realized the severity of the situation. These monsters lurked beneath the water's surface, dragging away the cruise ship's passengers to become their prey. To avoid becoming the monster's snack, they had to leave quickly. As everyone crowded into an elevator to escape, an unexpected guest descended from above. The elevator couldn't withstand the weight, and everyone's hearts trembled as it rapidly plummeted. Fortunately, they emerged unscathed. When they regained their senses, the horrifying scene before them sent shivers down everyone's spines. Bloodstains covered the walls, and skeletal remains were everywhere, as if hinting at the presence of demons from the deep sea. Just as everyone was trembling with fear, the horror did not end. The sea monster continued to pound against the steel plates. However, in the critical moment, the monster suddenly stopped its movements. Everyone held their breath. John and Hanover gathered their courage and approached to investigate. Just then someone crushed the skull with a foot, and the sea monster that heard the noise once again became violent. This frightened them, and they started firing their guns while retreating to a safe area. At this point, John finally realized that Simon and the mercenaries were in cahoots. Simon, burdened by immense pressure and debts, conspired with the mercenaries to deceive insurance money by deliberately causing the cruise ship's systems to malfunction and masquerading it as a maritime disaster. The mercenaries were then supposed to loot the ship. However, an unforeseen giant sea monster had disrupted this seemingly perfect plan. Now, their predicament was that the cruise ship's systems were destroyed, preventing them from sending a distress signal. The scheduled rescue was also a long 24 hours away. In the midst of the crisis, everyone was caught in heated arguments about the escape plan. However, the looming sea monster did not cease its movements. Joey's discovery left everyone dumbfounded as a colossal and terrifying sea monster appeared before them. John quickly took action, unleashing a barrage of gunfire that pierced through the sea monster's body. The horrifying sight that followed sent shivers down their spines. A teammate who had been swallowed was still alive, though half digested, emitting painful screams. Terrified by this gruesome spectacle, they tightly gripped their weapons and launched a frenzied attack on the sea monster. However, this horrifying sea monster seemed to be everywhere like a phantom, and they couldn't escape no matter where they fled. In their moment of despair, John crossed paths with Trillian. Trillian heard that John had a small boat, and she promised to fulfill any of his requests if he could help her escape this dreadful place. Just as John was contemplating this offer, the sea monster suddenly reappeared. John was startled and fell to the ground. The tentacles of the sea monster were filled with sharp teeth, and though it lacked eyes, it was exceptionally sensitive to sound. Even the slightest noise could pinpoint their location. The sea monster then opened its massive mouth and launched a fierce attack on John. In the nick of time, Trillian pulled out a pistol and unleashed a barrage, driving the sea monster away. To thank Trillian for saving his life, John promises to take Trillian safely away. However, Captain Atherton wasn't as fortunate. His legs were caught by the sea monster, and his life hung in the balance. Hearing his cries for help, John and Trillian rushed to rescue Captain Atherton, facing a colossal sea monster that could only be watched as tragedy unfolded before their eyes. Enraged, the group fired relentlessly at the sea monster, temporarily driving it back, and they breathed a sigh of relief. However, Simon revealed a horrifying piece of information to them. The tentacles they witnessed were likely just the tip of the iceberg. The way the sea monster fed was exceptionally terrifying. It first drained the human body with its tentacles and then regurgitated the bones. To avoid becoming the sea monster's dinner, they needed to return immediately to John's small boat and escape. Of course, the path ahead was treacherous. The only passage leading to the exit had already been submerged by seawater. John assembled Hanover and another mercenary to scout the route, while the rest waited in place. After a short exploration, the mercenary discovered a severed hand, indicating that the sea monster was nearby. As expected, those on shore did not receive good news. The sea monster was getting closer, and numerous gigantic tentacles relentlessly attacked them. Joey, frightened, hastily closed the hatch, but the sea monster's strength was terrifying, and even a sturdy steel door couldn't stop it. They fired frantically, one after another, jumping into the water, yet the water was equally perilous. Mason, swimming at the rear, was unfortunate to be caught by the sea monster. Realizing escape was impossible, he detonated a hand grenade. As they argued about the next steps, the cunning sea monster discovered their whereabouts. A terrifying tentacle appeared behind Mulligan. Fear was written all over the faces of his teammates. Mulligan swiftly turned around and launched a wild and fierce attack, channeling the accumulated rage into vengeful bullets, providing an outlet for his fury. Seizing the opportunity, the others quickly fled. The injured sea monster hastily escaped through the ventilation ducts. Mulligan taunted loudly, but another tentacle emerged from an unknown location, swallowing Mulligan whole. The others, led by John, hastily escaped. They were astonished to find that this sea monster was unusually intelligent. The sea monster continuously closed the hatches on their escape route, clearly intending to drive them towards the ship's bow. So what horrors await them at the bow? Simon pointed out the route to the bow and quietly slipped away. When they arrived at the bow, they witnessed an unforgettable scene: a pile of body remnants devoured by the sea monster. This place was evidently the sea monster's buffet. Suddenly, a strange noise from below, and the massive figure of the sea monster broke through the ship's bottom, causing a massive influx of seawater. They had no choice but to retrace their steps. Simon the scumbag closed the escape hatch. The sea monster's speed in the water was astonishing. In order to escape, Hanover injured Joey's leg. Panicking, Joey dove into a nearby passage to narrowly evade the attack. Limping, he reached a room where a hand suddenly grabbed him from behind. Hanover, in agony and trembling, was being viciously bitten by the sea monster on his lower body. Witnessing Hanover's torment, the compassionate Joey chose to help. Joey handed Hanover a pistol, hoping he would end his suffering on his own, but the ruthless Hanover shot at Joey. Good and evil will be rewarded in the end. Hanover never thought that the bullet he just shot at Joey was the last one. The mercenaries were wiped out. How could John and the others kill the sea monster and escape the cruise ship? Fortunately, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Through the pouring rain, they glimpsed a small island not far away. John suddenly remembered the torpedoes left by the mercenaries, which could be used against the sea monster. John instructed Trillian to find a motorboat to prepare for the journey to the small island. He put the torpedo on the boat and changed the driving mode to automatic. As long as the boat can follow a predetermined course and crash into the cruise ship, the sea monster can be eliminated. With everything in place, as they prepared to drive the motorboat towards the island, the entire cruise ship suddenly began to shake violently. The sea monster used its tremendous force to burst through the ship's bottom, revealing its true colossal form, an enormous octopus. As they contemplated their escape, the sea monster extended its powerful tentacles, capturing John. Despite his struggles, he couldn't break free. At that moment, the ferocious sea monster opened its fang-filled mouth, ready to swallow John. Seizing the opportunity, John continued firing at the sea monster. They take this opportunity to flee the scene quickly. Meanwhile, Simon arrived at the ship's edge and noticed that John's boat had started. Not wanting to miss the last chance for escape, he jumped from a considerable height, only to break a leg upon landing. Simultaneously, John and Trillian luckily found the motorboat. While the cruise ship was about to explode, the sea monster blocked the exit. Panicking, they quickly turned around to find another escape route. Relentlessly pursuing them, the sea monster chased from behind. John and Trillian, in a seamless collaboration, ran and fought. Unfortunately, the passage was blocked by an elevator, but John shot the switch, successfully opening the elevator. The sea monster was ultimately a step behind. Injured Simon desperately crawled into the control room, hoping to find a way to survive. However, he discovered that the small boat was set on autopilot, and no matter what he tried, he couldn't cancel the mode. The boat, loaded with torpedoes, approached the cruise ship, and Simon, in his unfortunate state, could only watch helplessly as he moved step by step toward death. On the other hand, John and Trillian, favored by Lady Luck, managed to dash out of the cruise ship just in time. It must be said that the 9 torpedoes left by the mercenaries were formidable, effortlessly demolishing the massive oil tanker. With the ship's destruction, the sea monster was instantly reduced to pieces. After a night of harrowing experiences, John and Trillian successfully reached the small island. Their relationship quickly blossomed, originally intending to lead a carefree life on the island. Their musings were interrupted by an unexpected appearance. Joey was still alive. Unbeknownst to them, a more significant surprise awaited them. Suddenly, terrifying roars echoed from the island, and what kind of monster this might be remained unknown. Clearly, the adventure of John and Trillian was far from over.